Hello everyone, my name is Magdalena Krysztoforska and I'm a PhD researcher based at the Centre for Critical Theory at the University of Nottingham, and my co-authors are Niall Docherty, lecturer in Data, AI and Society at the University of Sheffield, and Biega, a tenure-track faculty member at the Max Planck Institute for Security and Privacy, leading the Responsible Computing Group. The presentation will provide a brief overview of our paper entitled Integrative Objects in Sociotechnical Contexts, Constructing Digital Wellbeing with Generic Epistemology.
This paper emerged following an interdisciplinary collaboration between two of its authors into digital well-being. After this collaboration, between critical theory and computer science respectively, the scholars were left wondering why their project felt so difficult, and, more radically, if they were actually studying the same thing. Throughout their project, the authors faced several fundamental epistemic, ideological and personal differences, and, despite its success, they found that even resolving these differences did not allow them to develop future understandings of digital well-being, and did not help them produce new ways of designing healthier computational objects. Essentially, the authors discovered that digital well-being exceeded the rigid bounds of their respective disciplinary trainings and could not be understood through simply combining their different epistemic and methodological frameworks. Digital well-being is a matter of concern for several disciplines. However, adopting one disciplinary frame over another loses much that is central to it. For example, how can we present digital well-being solely as a technical concern that better design can fix when we know that users engage with technologies in unexpected ways? And should we treat digital well-being as a clinical issue at the expense of examining its sometimes positive cultural aspects? Here, we can observe that disciplinary thinking can only offer fragments of the whole. Moreover, this is a common problem with many of the objects currently examined by HCI, including artificial intelligence, for example, platform infrastructures, information access, sustainable computing, fairness, or data governance. How, then, can we conceptualize these types of multifaceted and multi-scale sociotechnical objects? And how can we study them? In response, this paper offers ideas drawn from generic epistemology to carve out one potential path forward. On the way, we will provide practical tools that can help HCI researchers adopt non-dogmatic approaches to interdisciplinary collaborations in the future.
Generic epistemology can be broadly described as a research and practice paradigm committed to openness and democracy of thought. The approach was originally developed by Anne-Françoise Schmid and cultivated alongside her collaborators across many different fields spanning the sciences, the arts, and design theory. Generic epistemology aims to expand and transform relations between disciplines and to enable productive engagement with contemporary objects of research that exceed disciplinary boundaries. Schmid refers to such objects as integrative objects. We can think here of examples such as climate change, genetically modified organisms, sustainability, or indeed digital well-being. The immense complexity and the constantly evolving nature of these objects mean that they exceed the productive capacity of singular disciplines as well as their convergence. Integrative objects require an approach where fragments of disciplines can be implemented in different contexts to produce new knowledge, but without the wholesale import of the methods and structures of their original disciplines. The notion of the generic is the key driver of this process, and it renders disciplinary concepts autonomous so as not to replicate the dogmatic and rigid aspects of disciplines that often impede interdisciplinary work. At the same time, the generic recognizes the value of disciplinary rigor and expertise. The aim of generic epistemology is not to abolish disciplines, but to recognize that many contemporary objects of research require heterogeneous modes of collaboration. The concept of the generic also motivates a non-dogmatic approach to questions of design. Much of this aspect of generic epistemology has been developed by Schmid in collaboration with design theorist Armand Autrel, and their approach focuses on creating conditions for unexpected conceptual formations to take place. They orient the process of design around construction of hypotheses, and in this way allow for objects and concepts to be conceived of independently of their current conditions and oriented towards the future.
One of the goals of our paper was to envisage how generic epistemology, and in particular some of the practical recommendations for fostering interdisciplinary research that have emerged through Schmid's various collaborations, could be translated to practical tools for collaborations on objects like digital well-being in HCI and other fields. And in this paper, those tools take the form of discussion prompts that could help researchers kick off a productive dialogue and collaborations. Because this presentation is very brief, we're going to walk you through just a few selected examples. One of the key steps for productive collaborations, according to generic epistemology, is for researchers to recognize the limits of their disciplines and to consciously map the discipline's internal landscapes by breaking them down into separate components. There are 6 key components outlined in prior work, and these are intellectual apparatus, temporality, modes of organization, a regime of scientific recognition based on appropriation and critique, a social system for producing peers, and an implicit knowledge of science. For example, it is important to learn about the intellectual apparatus of our collaborators' discipline to understand the discipline's main intellectual motivations. This could be fostered by questions like, what are the research goals of your discipline? Or what are some research questions your discipline is interested in directing at the object we want to study? But beyond this key component, there are also other, often perhaps less obvious components. For example, we should understand how a discipline constructs itself in terms of what it embraces and what it rejects. The discussion prompts that might be useful here include questions like, what kinds of problems does your discipline consider worthy of research? Or how do you judge the quality of a paper in your discipline? Or what kind of examination of the object we want to study would your field find outrageous? Overall, the internal balance and relative differences between all of these components are what differentiates and individualizes disciplines. One other example of a tool we'd like to highlight in this presentation is a method proposed by Schmid to enable underdetermination of integrative objects, and this is called the practice of fiction. In this technique, the initial object, such as digital well-being or a discipline, is reimagined as an unknown object to which properties can be added or subtracted. Hypothetically depriving objects of one of their significant properties forces us to mobilize our knowledge in a previously unexplored way, and possibly opening the door for new insights and for designing these objects differently. Using this approach in relation to our case study, in our paper we propose 3 procedures. One of them, as mentioned earlier, focuses on the removal of key properties of the object. We might ask, for example, what digital well-being would be without the notion of the good? Or what digital well-being would be without the user? While our own use of these methods has so far been related to digital well-being, the same tools could be applied to study other integrative objects. Looking at just last year's SIGCHI proceedings, we can distinguish many examples such as fairness, trust, sustainability, child welfare, nudging, and others. But while ideas of disciplinary dissolution and subtraction might be possible to grapple with conceptually, putting generic epistemology to practice can be seen as a balancing act. For example, the need to publish the results of a collaboration as a paper within a discipline can pull researchers out of the space of the generic. Our paper has provided practical recommendations for translating generic epistemology to HCI practice, but overall, We see this work as taking a step towards a more extensive exploration of the framework for engaging with sociotechnical objects in HCI and beyond. Thank you.